I swallowed the last of the painkillers, feeling the familiar lump in my throat. My husband, Adrian, his gaze fixed on the pill bottle, spoke in a tone dripping with impatience. "You've taken your meds, Eliza. No more excuses, right? Get on with the vacuuming." I winced, not just from the physical pain of my endometriosis, but from the sting of his words. "Just give it a moment to kick in. I'll clean up properly, Adrian." His response was a deep, exaggerated sigh, the kind that made me feel like a burden. As I struggled to suppress my own sigh, a sudden, sharp pain shot through my back. Collapsing to the floor, I looked up in disbelief to see Adrian, standing over me with a sneer. "Stop with your menstrual cramp theatrics, Eliza. Just get the job done." His voice was as cold as the floor I lay on. I, Eliza, at 32, found myself trapped in a marriage that had turned from a dream into a nightmare. Adrian and I met at the sales company where we both worked. He was the star salesman, known for his charm and quick wit. I was the newbie, eager and admiring. His mentorship turned into friendship, then into love, or so I thought. Our marriage began like a fairy tale, but as time passed, my health condition became a wedge between us. Endometriosis wasn't new to me, but Adrian's attitude towards it was. Initially, he was understanding, even caring. But after marriage, his empathy faded like mist in the morning sun. His disdain wasn't limited to my health issues. Adrian's career took off, and with that came arrogance. We both contributed to our household, but he made significantly more, and he never let me forget it. My efforts around the house were invisible to him. His eyes only saw the moments I spent resting, never the hours of pain-filled labor. When we moved to a new house, a step forward in our life together, his true colors bled through even more. He decided to host a family gathering to show off our new home. He handed me the list of guests, a mix of relatives, each with their own dietary preferences and dislikes. "Make sure everyone's happy, Eliza. No shortcuts, no excuses." I spent nights planning the menu, juggling the contrasting tastes and preferences. On the eve of the party, with my period in full swing, I managed to decorate the house and prep the food, all the while fighting back tears of pain and frustration. Adrian, oblivious to my struggles, spent the evening laughing at some show on TV, glass in hand, as I labored in the kitchen. I collapsed into bed that night, exhausted, hoping for a few hours of rest before the storm. The morning of the party, I was up before dawn, cooking and setting everything in place. The pain was relentless, but I pushed through, glancing at the clock, racing against time. I managed to set up everything just as the painkillers began to wear off, their effect fading like a mirage in the desert. Sitting gingerly on the sofa, trying to catch my breath, I glanced at Adrian. He sat there, casually sipping his drink, eyes glued to the TV. I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. He noticed my stare and turned to me, annoyance etched on his face. "What now, Eliza? Telling me I can't have a drink in my own house?" I shook my head, words still trapped. I just need a moment. The party, it's all set." He stood up, his movements deliberate, menacing. "You're always just needing a moment, aren't you? Playing the victim over a little stomach ache. My mother never acted like you do." His words were like daggers, each one piercing deeper. As I tried to defend myself, explaining that everything was ready, that I was just taking a brief respite, he cut me off. "No more of your excuses. I'm tired of them." And then, without warning, he kicked me, sending me tumbling off the sofa. The physical pain was sharp, but the shock of his action left me numb. I lay there, trying to process what had just happened, as he calmly sat down and started playing a game on his phone, laughing at his screen as if nothing had happened. I was still on the floor, trying to gather my strength to stand, when the doorbell rang. Our guests had arrived. With every ounce of willpower, I pushed myself up and plastered a smile on my face. The day had just begun. As I opened the door, the bright smiles of the arriving relatives clashed starkly with the turmoil within me. Their cheerful greetings and compliments on the house felt surreal, a stark contrast to the pain and humiliation I had just experienced. During the gathering, I moved like an automaton, serving dishes and smiling through clenched teeth. Adrian played the gracious host, charming and witty, a stark contrast to the monster I had seen just moments before. The mask he wore was impeccable, hiding his true nature from the world. Amidst the facade of normalcy, I caught sight of Martin, Adrian's father, standing in the doorway, observing the scene with a frown. His eyes met mine, and for a moment I saw a flicker of concern. He had always been a stern man, a strict father to Adrian, but today his usual sternness seemed tinged with something else. Disappointment, maybe even disgust. As the party continued, Adrian's demeanor grew increasingly jovial with each drink. His laughter was too loud, his gestures too grand. It was a performance, a show put on for the benefit of others. I knew the real Adrian, the one who lurked behind those smiles and charming words. The turning point came unexpectedly. I was in the kitchen, taking a moment to brace myself against the counter, when I heard raised voices from the living room. Peering out, I saw Martin confronting Adrian, his voice booming over the murmur of the guests. "What do you think you're doing, Adrian? I saw how you treated Eliza earlier. Is that how a man behaves? Is that how I raised you?" Adrian, caught off guard, tried to laugh it off. "Come on, Dad, it's nothing. Just a little spat between husband and wife. You know how it is." Martin's face reddened with anger. "A little spat? I saw you kick her, Adrian. That's not how you treat your wife, or any woman for that matter." The room fell silent, all eyes now on the father and son. Adrian's mask slipped, revealing a glimpse of the man I knew too well. "She was just being lazy, Dad. You know how women can be, making a big deal out of nothing. I was just helping her get back on track." His words sent a wave of shock through the room. The relatives looked at each other, disbelief and discomfort written on their faces. Martin stepped closer, his voice low but fierce. "Helping her? By kicking her? Is that what you call help? That's abuse, Adrian. You're abusing your wife." The word abuse hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Adrian's face twisted in anger, but before he could respond, Martin continued. "Your mother would be ashamed to see the man you've become. I'm ashamed. You're my son, but I won't stand by and watch you treat your wife like this." Adrian, now visibly shaken, tried to regain his composure. "Dad, you're overreacting. It's not like I hit her or anything. It was just a kick, a wake-up call." Martin's response was immediate and furious. "A wake-up call? You think physical violence is a wake-up call? That's where you're wrong, son. That's where you've lost your way." The confrontation escalated, with Martin denouncing Adrian's behavior in front of everyone. The family gathering, meant to be a celebration, had turned into a public airing of our private nightmare. As Martin stormed out of the room, followed by a few relatives, Adrian turned to me, his eyes searching for an ally. But I couldn't meet his gaze. I felt exposed, vulnerable, yet strangely liberated. The truth was out, and there was no going back. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Guests left early, murmuring their goodbyes and casting sympathetic glances my way. Adrian, now subdued, sat silently, the weight of his father's words and the guests' judgment pressing down on him. That night, as I lay in bed, my body aching, my mind raced. The events of the day had shattered the fragile facade of our marriage. Adrian's true nature was revealed, not just to me, but to everyone. The mask had slipped, and the monster was exposed for all to see. The morning after the party, the house was silent, a stark contrast to the previous day's chaos. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee, lost in thought. The events of yesterday replayed in my mind, each word, each look, cutting deeper than before. Adrian had left early, muttering something about clearing his head. The house felt different without his looming presence. Quieter, but not necessarily more peaceful. My thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. It was Martin. He stood there, a mix of anger and sorrow in his eyes. "May I come in, Eliza?" His voice was softer than I had ever heard it. I nodded, leading him into the living room. We sat in silence for a moment before he spoke. "I can't begin to express how sorry I am for what happened yesterday, for what my son did to you." His apology was sincere, but it did little to ease the turmoil inside me. "Thank you, Martin, but apologies won't change what happened." He nodded, his face lined with regret. "I know, and that's what I'm here to talk about. You see, Adrian's behavior, it didn't come out of nowhere. It's my fault, partly." I looked at him, surprised. Martin, always so stern and unyielding, was admitting fault. When I was younger, I wasn't the best husband to Adrian's mother. I was tough, demanding. I believed in discipline and keeping a tight ship. I thought I was doing right by my family, but I was wrong, so very wrong. His voice cracked, and for a moment I saw the man behind the facade, a man full of regrets. Adrian grew up watching me, learning from me. I thought I was teaching him to be strong, to be a man, but all I taught him was how to be hard, how to be cold. The revelation was a shock. I had always seen Martin as the unshakable patriarch, never questioning his methods or his influence. Martin, you can't blame yourself for Adrian's actions. He's an adult. He makes his own choices. Martin shook his head. That's just it, Eliza. We're all products of our upbringing, to some extent. I set a bad example, and Adrian followed it. I've realized that too late. There was a long pause before he continued. But that's not all. I'm here to tell you that you don't have to endure this. You have a choice, Eliza. You can leave Adrian, and I'll support you, financially, legally, whatever you need. His offer took me by surprise. Leave Adrian? The thought had crossed my mind more than once, but the reality of it was overwhelming. Martin, I need to think about this. It's not just a decision, it's my life. I understand, he said, standing up. But remember, you're not alone. You have options, and whatever you decide, I'll be there for you. As he left, I sat there, the weight of his words heavy on my shoulders. The option to leave, to start over, was tempting, but it was also terrifying. What would life be like without Adrian, without the marriage I had invested so much in? The rest of the day passed in a blur of thoughts and emotions. I was angry, hurt, confused, but above all, I was tired. Tired of the pain, the lies, the facade. That night, as I lay in bed, I made a decision. I would leave Adrian. I would start over. It would be hard, maybe the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I owed it to myself to try. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions and decisions. I began to untangle myself from the life I had built with Adrian. Each step was difficult, but Martin's support made it bearable. He helped me find a lawyer and even offered financial assistance, though I declined the latter. Adrian returned home after a few days. His demeanor changed. He was quieter, more contemplative. It seemed the confrontation with his father had shaken him. Eliza, we need to talk, he said one evening, his voice lacking its usual harshness. I braced myself. All right, let's talk. He took a deep breath. I've been doing some thinking. About us, about my behavior. I'm sorry, Eliza, for everything. His apology, though unexpected, didn't erase the pain he had caused. Sorry doesn't change what happened, Adrian. I know, and I don't expect it to, but I want to make things right. I want to change. His words were a surprise, but I was skeptical. Could a person really change so drastically overnight? Change isn't easy, Adrian. It takes more than just wanting it. I'm willing to try. I've even started seeing a therapist. I want to be better, for us. The revelation was shocking. Adrian, seeking therapy? It was a step I never thought he'd take. I'm glad you're seeking help, Adrian, but it doesn't change my decision. I need time and space to heal, to figure out what I want. The hurt in his eyes was evident, but there was also a glimmer of understanding. I get it. Take all the time you need. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying. As the days passed, Adrian's attempts to change were apparent. He was gentler, more considerate, but the scars he had left were too deep, and my decision remained firm. The day I moved out was filled with a mix of emotions: relief, sadness, fear, and hope. Adrian didn't stop me. He just stood there, watching silently as I left our home for the last time. Living alone was a new experience. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of freedom, a sense of control over my life. I could breathe, think, and heal without the shadow of Adrian looming over me. But freedom came with its own challenges. I had to rediscover who I was outside of my marriage, redefine my identity. It was daunting, but also exhilarating. One evening, as I sat in my new apartment, the doorbell rang. It was Martin. He stood there, looking older and more tired than I remembered. Eliza, I need to talk to you. It's about Adrian. I let him in, curious about what he had to say. Adrian's been doing well in therapy. He's making progress, but he's also struggling. He misses you, Eliza. He wants to make things right. I listened, feeling a mix of emotions: pity, anger, indifference. Martin, I appreciate what you're doing, but I can't go back. Not now, maybe not ever. I understand, he said softly, but he's my son. I had to try. As he left, I felt a sense of finality. My life with Adrian was over, and a new chapter was beginning. A chapter where I was in control, where I could write my own story. Life in my new apartment brought a sense of tranquility I hadn't felt in years. The days were mine to fill, the space mine to inhabit without fear or judgment. I found solace in the small things, the quiet mornings, the freedom to make my own decisions, the absence of Adrian's oppressive presence. But this newfound freedom also brought with it a need for introspection. I began to revisit my past, the choices I made, the signs I ignored. In the silence of my apartment, I confronted the reality of my marriage, the manipulation, the emotional abuse, and the deep-seated fear that had become a constant companion. One afternoon, as I sifted through old photos, a wave of anger washed over me. The smiling faces in the pictures were a stark contrast to the memories they now evoked. How had I let myself be treated that way? How had I stayed for so long? It was then that I realized my journey wasn't just about healing. It was about reclaiming my power, my voice. I wanted Adrian to understand the depth of the pain he had caused, to experience the consequences of his actions. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. The line rang, and then a familiar voice answered. "Hello, Eliza? Is that you?" It was Adrian's sister, Clara. We had been close once, before everything fell apart. "Clara, hi. It's been a while. I wanted to talk to you about something." Her voice was cautious. "Of course, Eliza. What's on your mind?" I took a deep breath. "I want to tell my story, Clara. I want people to know what happened, what Adrian did." There was a pause on the other end. "Eliza, are you sure? That's a big step, I'm sure. It's time people knew the truth. I'm tired of hiding, of pretending everything was fine." Clara's response was supportive, yet concerned. "Okay, I'm here for you. Whatever you need." I hung up the phone, feeling a mixture of relief and apprehension. I knew that speaking out would be difficult, that it would bring judgment and possibly backlash. But I also knew it was necessary, for my own healing and for the possibility of holding Adrian accountable. In the weeks that followed, I shared my story. First with friends, then in a local support group, and finally in a blog post that Clara helped me publish. The post detailed everything: the abuse, the manipulation, the fear. It was raw, honest, and unflinching. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support poured in, along with stories from other women who had experienced similar ordeals. But there were also those who doubted, who questioned my motives, who stood by Adrian. Adrian's reaction was a mix of shock and anger. He called me, his voice shaking with emotion. "Eliza, why did you do this? Why are you trying to destroy me?" I felt a surge of empowerment. "I'm not trying to destroy you, Adrian. I'm trying to heal. And part of that healing is speaking my truth." His pleas turned to threats, to bargaining, but I stood firm. I had found my voice, and I wasn't going to be silenced again. As the days passed, the impact of my revelation became apparent. Adrian's reputation suffered, his once charming facade now tainted by the truth of his actions. His friends began to distance themselves, and at work, he faced scrutiny and distrust. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about breaking the cycle of abuse. I had taken back control, not just of my life, but of my narrative. And in doing so, I had exposed Adrian for who he truly was. Several months had passed since I shared my story. The fallout for Adrian had been significant. His social circle had shrunk, and his professional life had taken a hit. But for me, it was a time of rebuilding and rediscovery. I had started therapy, which helped me process my past and envision a future that was mine to shape. One crisp autumn evening, as I sat wrapped in a blanket on my balcony, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Adrian. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't heard from him in weeks. "Eliza, can we meet? I need to talk to you. Please." Against my better judgment, curiosity got the better of me. I agreed to meet him at a nearby cafe the next day. Sitting across from Adrian in the cafe, I noticed the changes in him. He looked older, warier. The arrogance that once defined him seemed to have dissipated. "Eliza, thank you for coming," he began, his voice unsteady. "I've been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of therapy, and I realize now how much harm I've caused you." His words were a stark contrast to the man I had known. "Adrian, words are one thing, actions are another. What do you want from me?" He sighed, looking down at his hands. "I don't expect forgiveness or for you to come back. I just wanted to apologize, truly apologize, and to tell you that I'm working on myself, trying to be a better person." The sincerity in his voice was unexpected, but it didn't erase the past. "That's good to hear, Adrian, but it doesn't change what happened. It doesn't change the fact that I've moved on." He nodded, a sad smile on his lips. "I know, and I'm happy for you, truly. I just hope that one day you can look back and see that I'm not the same person I was." The conversation was a strange mix of closure and revelation. As we parted ways, a part of me felt lighter, while another part remained cautious, wary of the man he once was and might still be. Returning to my apartment, I reflected on the encounter. Adrian's apology, his apparent change, it was more than I had expected. But it didn't alter the course I was on. My journey was my own now, no longer tied to him or his redemption. Days turned into weeks, and life settled into a new rhythm. My blog had become a platform for discussion and support, connecting me with a community of people who shared similar experiences. My story had struck a chord, and in sharing it, I had found purpose and strength. Adrian, meanwhile, continued his therapy and reportedly made strides in changing his behavior. Rumors reached me through mutual acquaintances. Some expressed skepticism, others noted genuine improvements. But to me, Adrian's journey was no longer my concern. My focus was on my path, my healing. As I lay in bed one night, a realization dawned on me. In seeking justice, in speaking my truth, I had not only exposed Adrian, but freed myself from the chains of our toxic relationship. The pain he had caused was still a part of me, but it no longer defined me. I had found my voice, my strength, and with that, I had found a new beginning, a new chapter where I was the author, and the story was mine to write. Months had passed since my last encounter with Adrian. My life had taken on a new shape, filled with possibilities and free from the shadows of my past. I had immersed myself in new activities, met new people, and even started dating again. Cautiously, but with a renewed sense of hope. One rainy afternoon, as I sat in my living room, the familiar chime of an email notification broke the silence. It was from Adrian. My heart raced as I opened it, unsure of what to expect. "Eliza, I know you've moved on, and I'm trying to do the same. I'm leaving town, starting fresh in a new city. Before I go, I wanted to thank you. Thank you for opening my eyes to the pain I caused, not just to you, but to myself. I'm sorry for everything, and I hope one day you can truly forgive me. Adrian." The email was a surprise, a final acknowledgement of the change he had promised. I sat there, staring at the screen, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. Adrian leaving town felt like the closing of a chapter, a final severing of the ties that bound us. I replied with a simple message. "Thank you for the apology, Adrian. I wish you well in your new life." Hitting send felt like a weight lifting off my shoulders. It was an act of closure, of letting go of the past and embracing the future. The weeks that followed were a testament to the change in my life. My blog had grown into a small community of support and empowerment. I had started writing a book about my experiences, hoping to inspire others who might be in similar situations. One evening, as I sat at my desk, the phone rang. It was Clara, Adrian's sister. "Eliza, I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. You've turned something terrible into something positive. You're an inspiration." Her words warmed my heart. "Thank you, Clara. It means a lot coming from you." As we talked, I realized how far I had come. From a victim of abuse to a voice of empowerment. My story had not only helped me heal, but had also touched the lives of others. Clara's call ended with an invitation to a family gathering. I hesitated at first, but then accepted. It was a chance to reconnect with those who had been a part of my life, to show them the person I had become. The gathering was a bittersweet reunion. There were moments of awkwardness, but also moments of genuine connection. I realized that while my relationship with Adrian was over, my relationships with others in his family didn't have to be. As I drove home that evening, the city lights reflecting in the rain-soaked streets, I felt a sense of peace. The journey I had embarked on had been long and challenging, but it had led me to a place of strength and self-discovery. My story was one of many, a single thread in the tapestry of life, but it was a thread woven with resilience, courage, and hope, a testament to the power of speaking out, of standing up for oneself. I had found my voice in the darkness, and in doing so, I had found the light. And with that light, I stepped forward into a new dawn, ready to write the next chapter of my life.